I'm Emily Guy Birkin, and you're listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit. Because pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head? On today's episode, I will be sharing my deep thoughts about the 1984 film Revenge of the Nerds with my sister, Tracy Guy Decker. And with you. Let's dive in.
Have you ever had something you love dismissed because it's just pop culture? What others might deem stupid shit, you know matters. You know it's worth talking and thinking about. And so do we. So come overthink with us as we delve into our deep thoughts about stupid shit.
So, Tracy, tell me what you remember about this oddly influential film.
Yeah, I remember, I remember the rough plot, as there is one, these kids, misfits, who the fraternities don't want, and so they get together and form their own fraternity. And I have strong memory of like a black man in two short shorts and a headband.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sort of the end, like, oh, there's a pie selling contest or something, and there's like naked pictures of a girl at the bottom of the pie that the nerds do. Mm-hmm. And I remember the final rape by deception, where one of the nerds is wearing the same Darth Vader costume as the popular girl's boyfriend, and they have sex in like a bounce house or something. Mm-hmm. And then the movie makers make us okay with the fact that he raped her by deception by making her like it. Mm-hmm. And I remember being like icked out by that even as a teenager. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's about it. That's what I remember. But why are we talking about this?
Oh, so this film has been on our list for a while. And the first time it kind of came up, I was like, I'm not in the right headspace to watch this movie and think about it. But as I said, this is a strangely influential film. It is remembered fondly by a lot of people. And I wanted to talk about it because I remember being icked out by it as like a very small child. So I'm sure it came out in 1984. I'm certain I did not see it then.
When you were 5?
When I was 5. But yeah. I believe I was still in elementary school when I saw it for the first time. And it was a sort of film that would show up on like, just on TV. And I'm sure there was a TV version where they edited stuff. Part of the reason why it stuck with me was that rape by deception scene was horrifying to me. And I know I felt kind of bifurcated by this film because I thought of myself as a nerd.
Yeah.
But the nerds would not have accepted me.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do feel like this 40-year-old movie can help us understand a lot of the toxic masculinity culture, including incels and, the violence against women that we see. And what's really kind of overwhelming and upsetting to me is that the filmmakers thought that they were making a commentary about discrimination. And they made some very intentional parallels between the plight of these nerds and racial discrimination. And man, oh man, did they miss the mark. And yet this is a lot of people think about this fondly. It launched a franchise. There were like 4 movies.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah. There was a follow-up that was released in the theaters, and then there were 2 more that were like made for TV.
Straight to video or something?
Yeah, yeah. And then there have been other, like there have been talks about a reboot. There was at some point in the 2000s, Curtis Armstrong and Robert Carradine did a reality show about like beating the nerd or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was. So like it's still in cultural consciousness. And I really think we need to talk about it and talk about why we are so primed to believe that awkward, nerdy, doesn't fit in necessarily equals marginalized or discriminated against.
Interesting.
This one, I'm going to say buckle up because it's going to be a tough one.
Okay.
The basic plot, as you say, it's we meet Gilbert and Lewis. Gilbert is played by Anthony Edwards. Lewis is played by Robert Carradine. They are high school best friends who are going to Adams University together. They are dropped off, and they are stereotypical nerds in the way that they look. The big glasses. They have button-up shirts all the way up to their neck. They're wearing pocket protectors with pens and things like that. We are also immediately introduced to the most popular fraternity on campus, the Alpha Betas, because there is one Alpha Beta. His name is Ogre, and he's this like big hulk of a football player, and he is hanging someone off the balcony of the Alpha Beta fraternity house by his ankles, and he sees Lewis and Gilbert walking across campus with their trunk, because Lewis's dad dropped them off just randomly somewhere instead of at their dorm. So they're carrying this very heavy trunk all the way across campus. One of many things that just makes no sense. Anyway, so Ogre sees them and shouts "nerds" and drops the guy, and nothing ever happens. So this is our introduction to the Alpha Betas. The head of that fraternity is Stan Gable. He is played by Ted McGinley, who you would recognize if you saw him. He played a neighbor on Married with Children. And apparently he was cast because he was a model, or like at his University of Southern California, he was on the cover of like the I don't know, magazine, or like the alumni magazine, something like that. And someone saw him, and he is remarkably handsome. And so like, oh, he's perfect. He's exactly who we want. And he also had been doing like modeling and acting. The Alpha Betas end up burning down their fraternity house. It's an accident, but it's entirely their fault. There's a guy doing fireballs. He's spitting like 180 proof alcohol and lighting it on fire, and he does that towards the curtains. Entire house burns down, and the coach, who is played by John Goodman.
Oh, weird.
I know. And my goodness, like I've never seen him looking so young, and he's so handsome. So like, and it's like, anyway, he basically allows the football players to say that, yeah, it must be faulty wiring, and, like bowls over the dean. And they're like, well, where the Alpha Beta is going to sleep? Like, we need them to be well rested for their football games. So they go to the freshman dorms, which is where Lewis and Gilbert are, and they kick out and like literally throw one guy out at the window, these kids out of the freshman dorms, and they set them up in a gymnasium with cots. And the dean says to these kids, not to worry, you can, we're allowing you to rush fraternities even though you're freshmen. And so you can get housing through fraternity. So starting tomorrow. And so most of the people who are displaced end up joining a fraternity, but Lewis and Gilbert and the rest of the misfits are not allowed into the fraternities. So they start looking for other places to live. They find a dilapidated old house that they're able to buy. And there's the most 80s montage scene ever, including a robot cleaning up the house. It's baffling. They get the house all cleaned up. Now, Stan, played by Ted McGinley, the head of the Alpha Betas, his girlfriend is named Betty. She is the head of Pi Delta Pi sorority. And they are riding by on his motorcycle. And she's like, wow, the nerds really did a terrific job with that house. And he's like, it's not going to be terrific for long. And so that night the alpha betas throw a rock through the window that says, nerds get out. So Gilbert and Lewis and friends go to the police, who say, yeah, unfortunately, this looks like a Greek prank, and the only thing you can do is go to the Greek council. Again, it's just like, none of this is how this works. So they go to the Greek council, and Stan is the president of the Greek council and basically has power over everything. And he says, basically, no, we can't do anything because you're not in a fraternity. You have to be part of Greek life in order for. So I'm like, so basically anyone in a Greek fraternity can do anything to a civilian and nothing happens to them. Okay. So they apply for something like 30 different fraternities. They get turned down, all of them saying, like, you shouldn't have sent a picture, because they sent a picture of the group. And there's one that they didn't send a picture to. It's Lambda Lambda Lambda, also known as Tri-Lam, which we learn after they get conditional acceptance, is a historically Black fraternity. So they get there, they get to the meeting. UN Jefferson is the name of the head of Lambda Lambda Lambda. He is played by, and I'm forgetting his name, but he is a former football player who became an actor, who honestly brings a level of gravitas to this film that I was glad to see. And he initially is like, I don't know, you're nerds. Like, it's very much like, we don't want you because you're nerds. And one of the nerds, Poindexter, played by Timothy Busman, who you would recognize if you saw him, even though he is unrecognizable in this film. He plays the brother-in-law in Field of Dreams. Okay. He says, well, actually, according to your bylaws, you have to allow us like a 60-day probationary period. And Jefferson's second in command says, actually, that's true. And so the first thing that the nerds do that Jefferson actually kind of approves of is he says, well, don't worry, we're going to be very welcoming. We will not turn anyone away based on race, religion, creed. And then the one guy that you remember, the character's name is Lamar Latrelle. He's played by Larry B. Scott. He's a Black man who is very obviously gay in very 80s kind of way. And he says, or sexual orientation. And so Jefferson had been starting to be like, okay. And then Lamar says that, and he's like, he scowls again, kind of. So they say, okay, well, we're going to throw a party, as a welcoming thing. They ask the Pi Delta Pies, the Pi Delta Pies offer to come be their dates for this party. And so they're super excited about it. Lewis has a crush on Betty. And then, of course, none of them show up. In the meantime, Gilbert has met a girl nerd from the Omega Mu sorority. It's the only time that anyone seems to actually have a kind of real interaction with a woman who's not a mom. With the exception of the fact that, like, even though she's a girl nerd, she doesn't seem to be good at anything. Like, she's having trouble with her computer. And so he's like, oh, no, it's really cool. And he's showing her how to do stuff with it. And it's another moment of computers are magic, because he just manages to bring up, create an image of her and him holding hands with a 1984 computer and keyboard.
And a keystroke. And
keystrokes, yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, he draws, glasses, and then draws her face and her hair and it's just like, no. Anyway, so her name is Judy. Judy is at the party. She's like, well, my sorority could come. Curtis Armstrong, his character is Booger.
Ugh. And
to the point where I think of Curtis Armstrong as either Booger or Herbert Viola from Moonlighting. Mm-hmm. So every time I see him, I I hear the his love interest say Herbert in that name, in that voice, or I hear it's Booger. Like he just, that's how strong this association is with this actor. Anyway, Booger says, don't have the Omega Moos come. They're all pigs.
Ew.
And they then have this extended scene of them arriving where we are made sure to get in a view of every single one of these unattractive women. And I just read this morning that the women playing the Omega Moos, the extras, were real college students. They filmed on the University of Arizona campus. And so these are just regular women. It's so gross. Now, they do make it clear that, not clear, Booger starts having a good time. He's partying with some of these women. Everyone kind of ends up like pairing off or something and enjoying themselves. But it's still very much a...
So what, we're meant to like forgive them for judging the girls because they have a good time with them anyway, despite the fact that they're pigs?
I don't know. And they only start having a good time, like the party's just dead. Lamar and his date, who is a guy, are the only people dancing. And Jefferson and his second in command are there, just kind of standing around. And so at one point, Lewis says, I don't know if they like this music. I'm going to put on something that they might like better. And so he changes the music and he puts on Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, which Lamar immediately goes and turns off.
He puts on a Negro spiritual?
Yes.
To appeal to the two black guys who are the head of the historically black fraternity that they're trying to create a chapter of. All right.
Different things are going on. Judy plays the accordion and sings. Jefferson kind of appreciates that. They try a couple of different things, and then finally Booger gets out some joints and passes them around, and that's when everyone starts having a really good time.
Of course.
And one of the nerd girls propositions Lewis, and they go upstairs. In the midst of this, the alpha betas show up and release pigs into the house. And then when they manage, the nerds manage to corral the pigs out of the house, they're on this like wagon that's got Adams University on it. So this is like college stuff, like, and they, I don't know what, I don't remember what they say, but they end up mooning them and, you know, insulting
Wait, the
them.
alpha betas are mooning them?
The alpha betas are mooning the nerds.
And the alpha betas are sitting on a Adams University cart of some kind.
Yeah. It's a truck with a wagon attached. Like, breaks up the party. They're really upset. And the nerds are like, well, we need to retaliate. Lewis says, I know exactly what we're going to do. The next scene, they're playing the Mission Impossible music, and they go on a panty raid in the Pi Delta Pi house. The panty raid is a distraction from the fact that they are actually wiring the house with cameras, and then they spend the night watching these women getting undressed.
My God.
Mm-hmm.
In a panty raid, they run through the house and steal underwear? Is that what that means?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And they managed to see several naked women during this panty raid. It is so gross.
Ugh.
It's so nasty.
And these are our protagonists.
These are our heroes.
And we're supposed to sympathize with them because they've been rejected by the popular people?
Yeah. So that's one thing they do. It's also, you know, while the Pi Delta Pi said they'd be at the party and didn't show up, which is a social faux pas. It's the alpha betas who released the pigs and mooned them, and we're like, so why are they getting revenge on the Delta Pies? Well, it's because they
They're
belong to the
women.
alpha betas. You know, they're
Yeah,
not people in
yeah,
their own rights. They didn't make their own decision. They're just pawns in this game.
yeah.
The next thing that they do is they get, it's basically like Bengay, like a heating oil or something
Uh-huh.
like that, and they put it in the jock straps of all
The
the
football
football
players.
players, and that is also kind of assault, not okay. But that at least was taking revenge on the right people.
Yeah. Hmm.
You know, like, I'm not saying I condone that, but in a movie called Revenge of the Nerds, that's the kind of thing that I.
Yeah, and it doesn't do permanent damage, and it's not psychologically like, you
Mhm,
know, like it's very, very uncomfortable for
mhm.
those men. Yeah, like that one, if that had been the revenge, like, eh, don't want my kid doing it, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah, yeah. They end up telling Jefferson about what they've done. And apparently in the 80s, the belief was that that's what fraternities were supposed to be about, because Jefferson is delighted and says, "Oh, I'm so proud of you for retaliating."
I see.
It, and what? So they are duly inducted. They send a picture of themselves to the Tri-Lam office, and you see Jefferson very proudly putting it up on the wall with the other chapters. And as they are toasting the inception of this new fraternity, they look outside, and the alpha betas have put up the word nerds and flaming, like a flaming effigy of the word nerds on their front porch.
The Adams house,
The alpha
the
beta
Adams
house.
universe.
Stan and
No,
Ogre's
no.
house.
Alpha betas are the bad guys,
Yes.
the
And
jocks.
yes.
And
And
they're burning the word nerds on the front lawn of
the
what house?
Lambdas, the nerds house, the
At
Tri-Lam.
Adams, not where
Yeah.
Jefferson is.
No. This is after, you know, the we don't see Jefferson and the Lambdas or the nerds interact with each other again until the end of the film. So like they have mailed the picture to Jefferson, and it is after they have received the like acceptance. So the word nerds is being burned on the front lawn of the Tri-Lam house. They again go to the police, who refers them once again to the Greek council. The dean says, like, this is very clearly alpha beta. We need to take a vote. And Stan, as the president of the Greek council, says, no, we're not gonna. And they're like, well, you can't do that. He's like, well, no, I'm president of the Greek council. Pretty much anything I say goes. Like, I mean, that's the rule. So the only way the nerds are going to get justice is if one of them becomes the president of the Greek council. And the way this happens is whichever fraternity and sorority pairing wins the homecoming carnival gets to choose the Greek council president for the next year. That is not how any of this works, but okay. So there are several things. There's like a homecoming Olympics type thing. There's a charity fundraiser, and there is a talent show. So those are the three things. So for the Olympics, the first one is riding a tricycle, but it's 20 laps, but at the end of each lap, you have to chug a beer. This is a college-sponsored event. So the nerds have some sort of drug that they give their competitor, who is a very offensive Japanese stereotype named Takashi, that counteracts the effects of the beer. So he wins. There is a tug of war. The nerds are up against the alpha betas, and they just let go of the rope and let the alpha betas fall over, like, you win, knowing that they can't win with that. They have male versus female, like, so fraternity versus sorority arm wrestling.
What?
The joke with that one is one of the Omega Mu's, which is Judy's sorority of
Right.
the non-attractive women, nearly beats Ogre, like the big brutish guy.
Uh-huh.
And then there's a javelin throw where they have like the ROTC and Alpha Betas and one other fraternity all do very well with the javelin throw. And then
Lamar does that,
Lamar
doesn't he?
does that one.
I remember
And
that.
there is a 12-year-old in the fraternity who, because he's very gifted, he goes to college at age 12. And he and Lamar are like best friends. And actually that is one of the only lovely things in the movie is the relationship between Lamar and Wormser is the 12-year-old's name. But even that, like, Lamar is helping Wormser to like put the cameras in to spy on the women, and they're all there as
It's like a wobbly javelin. Does
yes.
it like?
And it's because Wormser is an aerodynamics expert, and so he has specifically designed the javelin to work best with Lamar's limp-wristed throwing technique, is how they put it.
Ugh.
So they win that. It's neck and neck when they get to the charity
Fundraising.
The Alpha Betas and the Pi Delta Pies are doing a kissing booth.
Right.
Which is so nasty. Like, first of all, post-COVID, I'm just like, ew! You're all getting communicable diseases. Ew, 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 ew. And it even says, like, you know, small, medium, large kiss, and then with tongue. So, like, small kiss is 50 cents. With tongue is $5.
Oh.
And so Lewis has bought his ticket, and this is presumably homecoming is close to Halloween because everyone's in costumes, has bought his ticket and says, and gets up to where Betty is giving out kisses and says like, hey, now you got to kiss me. And she's like, no. He's like, well, I bought my ticket. And she's like, well, it's about time for my break. And so she walks off, and they bring in a large woman to be like, here's who you're kissing.
Cool. Fatphobia.
Yeah.
Let's hit them all.
Yeah. And Stan is dressed in this kind of like off-brand Darth Vader. Like, I remember it being Darth Vader, but it's not. It's like a weird mask thing, and he's wearing like a vampire like cape. And Lewis is dressed as like a magician because he's got a top hat and he's also got a black cape. And Betty goes to Stan and says like, all this kissing is turning me on. Like, let's go somewhere and do it. And he says to her like, you're a goat. Because she does say I'm horny, but I don't know. I don't know. So Stan puts his hat and mask down, and Betty goes off towards, what did they call it? It's like on the moon. And so like it's like a maze or like
but it's like inflatable, right?
Yeah, it's like a fun house, but in the middle there's the moonwalk, which is where there's like a moon bounce type thing. Thing. So Lewis takes the mask, follows Betty, and basically has sex with her without. It's suggested that he goes down on her, which I don't know.
But he doesn't take the mask off.
I mean, yeah. It's
okay.
I think he tells her no, he's not taking the mask off, and I think he like lifts it up because she's still fully clothed afterwards, and
okay, whatevs.
And she says to him, "You've done things you've never done to me before."
Yeah, and he says like, I remember later the punchline like, nerds think about sex all the time because we aren't having any.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, it's so nasty. It's so awful. And like, you know, you cut away, come back, and she's like, oh, you've done things you've never done to me before. And he comes up without the mask on. She's like, oh, you're that nerd. And she's not, she's like, she's surprised, but then she's like, that was amazing. What's your name? And like, is okay with it.
Ugh.
And then she says to him, meet me later after the pep rally. Meanwhile, Stan is like, oh man, we're bringing in so much money. We're gonna win the charity fundraiser. And another one of the alpha betas says, no, actually, like they're selling more at the nerds are selling more. And they're like, what? They're just selling pie. I don't get it. And so it turns out that their pies are just, it's a pie plate with a picture of one of the Pi Delta pies glued to the bottom, and then they put whipped cream on top, just a little bit of whipped cream on top.
Yeah, a nudie picture from their hidden cameras.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, revenge porn, sexual assault. And this is interesting. They have Ogre go and get one of the pies. Like he eats all the whipped cream. He's like, I don't get it. It's just whipped cream. And then they look at it and they say, like, it's just a pie. And then he sees, like, actually it's Betty. And he's like, that's my pie, because she's a Pi Delta pie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's supposed to be like, there's like so many gross jokes about pie and hair pie, and the Pi Delta pie is like delta's a triangle, and
Mm-hmm.
at one point Stan says there's something fishy about that pie, and like it's all these just not ugh. So like, but that's my pie is supposed to be again like that sort of thing. But Ted McGinley's a good enough actor that I actually feel like he's upset, in that, like, that is his girlfriend with whom he presumably has a loving relationship. Like, just he just sounds upset, as he should be. And even though it's a like, that's mine kind of upset, but there's also a devastation, like, oh my God, how did they get this picture of this woman that I care about? It's just, we then go to the talent show. They're kind of gross sexual innuendo about a bunch of stuff. There's one unrelated fraternity that actually, they have a stand-up routine where one says to the other, what did the Pink Panther say when he stepped on a bug? Dead ant, dead ant, dead ant, dead ant, dead ant, which, whatever, it's fine. And then the other one says, like, yeah, what did June say to Ward Cleaver? You were a little too hard on the beaver last night. Solid. I mean, that is solid innuendo. So there's that. There's the row, row, row has a row, row, row your boat thing, but they mime like fellatio. It's the alpha betas and the Pi Delta pies do this thing, it's gender bent thing where the alpha betas are dressed as cheerleaders because the Pi Delta pies are all the cheerleaders, and the Pi Delta pies are dressed as football players, and they sing the song. It's actually kind of, it's pretty cool and kind of cute. And then we get to the nerds, and they do this like Devo type thing where it's Lewis and Gilbert are dressed in like yellow jumpsuits, kind of like Devo, and like pretending to do like electronic music. And then they have Booger dressed as Elvis Presley. They have Poindexter, Timothy Busman, who has been clear all along. He's terrible at violin, but he's doing like electric violin. And it's actually really pretty cool. Then in comes Lamar dressed as Michael Jackson, and he does this like kind of rap. It is very, very early 80s, but it's actually pretty cool. I mean, and some of it's come back around again. So, 40 years later, like you can see the cool of it. And then he brings out Wormser, and he and Wormser dance together. They do like pop and lock and like the robot and stuff like that. But Takashi, the Japanese character, is dressed as a Native American in full headdress. So even this one moment where I was like, this is actually really cool, and I really am enjoying this. Oh boy. With that, the nerds win the carnival, and Lewis says, we want Gilbert to be the president of the Greek Council. and like everybody wins, all happy, good. Well, Coach Harris, John Goodman, he takes the football players who are all still dressed as cheerleaders back to the locker room. And he's like, I want you girls back in the locker room right now. And he yells at them about how, you know, when they were babies, their fathers, all he wanted was for them to be men, and they let nerds beat them. And are they going to let nerds beat them? They're not real men. Real nasty stuff. And so still dressed as cheerleaders, which I think is significant, Stan and the rest of the Alpha Betas go and completely trash the Tri-Lambda house. And the nerds come back. They find the mess. Their robot that they had, you know, helped them with all kinds of stuff is destroyed. And they're all really upset trying to clean it up. And Gilbert's like, it doesn't matter what we do. We're always going to be nerds. And he's like, I just need to go get some air. And he goes walking back to where the pep rally is. The Alpha Betas are back in their regular clothing, and they are like attacking him, and they push him into a fountain. So he's like completely soaking wet. And then Coach Harris gets involved and is about to throw a punch. And the dean finally stands up to him and says, like, look, he's just a boy. You need to stop. And Harris like is about to go attack the dean when some deep bass music comes on, and here come all the Tri-Lambdas. So
from other campuses.
From, yes.
So the historically Black fraternity members.
Yes. All show up, all dressed in three-piece suits. Apparently, that's enough to intimidate Coach Harris to get him to stop. And he says to Gilbert, who had been trying to get the microphone, here, say what you have to say. And so Gilbert basically is like, you know, I'm a nerd. I'm proud of myself for, you know, like, you know, just because I don't fit in doesn't mean I deserve to be treated like crap. And then Lewis comes along, is like, you know, I'm a nerd, you know, and I bet some of you are nerds too. Who else feels like a nerd sometimes? And so Betty comes and joins him because she's in love with a nerd now. Because anyway, people start joining in and the nerds win, basically. So the only moment in the film that I actually laughed is when, like, who else feels like a nerd? And the entire marching band comes across to join them. Like, no hesitation. And that has more to do with my experience having been in marching band.
That's cute.
Because there are the other groups, there is some hesitation, but like marching band, it's like, oh yeah, those are my people. Oh, and that I haven't even, like, there's a bunch of stuff that I've skipped over.
And we've been talking for over 40 minutes, so.
Yeah, it's a mess.
So in this movie that was supposed to be about, like, pointing out how ridiculous discrimination is, it actually perpetuated sexism, racism, homophobia, fatphobia, anti-intellectualism. What am I missing?
Transphobia, misogyny. No, I haven't gotten to the transphobia, because when Gilbert meets Judy, he's really excited, and at lunch he's talking to Booger and Lewis about it, and he says, like, oh yeah, I met a girl, it's great. And Booger says, well, did you get in her pants? And he says, well, she's not that kind of girl. And Booger says, oh, so does she have a penis? Is she that kind of girl? Or something along those lines. And it's like, ugh. The like the implications are just, yeah. Like, and that line, and I was just like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting to get transphobia too.
It's an equal opportunity offensive.
Yeah. I want to talk about what they think they were doing.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what what your analysis of that is. I'd love to get you started this whole thing by saying it was like surprisingly beloved. So I'd like to get at some of that if you have speculation. So let's start with what the movie makers meant to do.
So I think the movie makers were trying to say that discrimination is wrong. I think that's what they were trying to say. And I kind of get where they think they're saying that, because the thing that I kept coming back to as I was watching it last night was like, my God, the alpha betas are being so mean for no reason. You know, like they're throwing their weight around in ways that just don't make sense. And it's easy to see that in a film where the distinctions between them is, you know, like relative social aptitude, attractiveness, you know, interests, you know, like sportiness, that sort of thing. So seeing the like ogre immediately go nerds the minute he sees them and be like trying to menace them is like very clearly like, what the hell is wrong with you? You're being so mean. Whereas seeing someone have that kind of reaction, now granted it's over the top because it's a sex comedy romp, but having someone have that kind of like negative, nasty, menacing reaction towards a marginalized group that we have more traditionally accepted as marginalized would not have us immediately go like, why are you being so mean? Why are you being so nasty? We'd be like, well, okay, you know, traditionally it's, you know, it's not okay for you to be so mean, but I understand why you're being like that towards blah, 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 because blah, 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 group is blah, 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 you know, whatever. So I feel like that's what they think they're doing. They think that they are trying to show how unreasonable and ridiculous discrimination and prejudice is by doing it towards a group that prior to this did not necessarily have a rallying cry, did not necessarily have a cohesive group feeling. So like people who were nerds prior to this might have felt alone and didn't feel like they had a group dynamic that they could rely on to be like, you know, okay, we can work together. And so they were very intentional in like the Tri-Lambs being a historically Black fraternity. They wanted to draw that parallel. And that moment where he puts on the spiritual, I'm honestly not sure about that moment, because on the one hand, they very immediately make it clear that Lewis is wrong to do that and that he is like overstepping, because Lamar immediately takes it off. But there's no like, hey, dude, that's not okay. And there was apparently a deleted scene where Lewis and Gilbert go to like the meeting of the Tri-Lambdas to meet other chapters, and they dress in like traditional African garb to try to fit in. And it's the well-meaning white person type thing. And it feels like what the film is trying to do is poke fun at, you know, Lewis is so smart. He gets so many things and he's so completely clueless about this.
Well, he's clueless about all social things, right? So
yeah.
race is just one more factor, a social factor around which he is clueless, right? Like the whole point is he doesn't fit into any society. Why would he fit into this one?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
which is maybe why it wasn't like, come on, man, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Right? Because like when he makes sort of socially awkward moments in other ways by wearing pocket protectors or whatever.
And I think like part of what gets me, and this is like with 40 years of hindsight, is when Lewis and Gilbert are carrying this enormous trunk all the way across campus because Lewis's dad dropped them off in a random spot instead of where their dorm was. They are walking across the quad and they're carrying this trunk over top of other people, and like they cause a bicycle to derail, and they break up this picnic that these two girls are having. And I know it's supposed to be this funny like, oh, they're so clueless, but to me it was just like, that's such a like entitled thing to do. And I know that that is not what they were going for, but that kind of like, you can't blame us, we're clueless. Weaponized incompetence is what got me. And obviously, like, I can see someone going like, oh, it's just a gag, you're taking it too seriously. But there's a point where they carry it over top of, there's a boy and a girl lying on the ground kissing and are unaware that they're over top of them. And Lewis and Gilbert are unaware that they're underneath of them. And it's like clearly a very heavy trunk. They could have killed them if they dropped it.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Or at least seriously harmed them. And so like that's my initial impression of them. These are like, rampaging wildebeests who are like, oh, you can't blame me, I don't mean anything by it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a very privileged state of being, that because they are young white men, they can get away with. Like Lamar is in a lot of ways my favorite character because he understands the world he's navigating.
Well, my dude is genuinely marginalized in multiple ways as a Black gay man in the 1980s.
Yes. To the point where Larry B. Scott, who played him, had difficulty after this because people assumed he was really gay. And that was actually a problem for actors in the 80s. And part of the reason why I like him is he's also the one who recognizes that Wormser is a kid and he takes care of him.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's what the filmmakers were trying to do. Now, the filmmakers clearly do not recognize that women are people.
No. Mm-mm.
To the point where sometime in the last 5 or 10 years, and I'll link to this in the show notes, they talk about it, I think, on the Wikipedia page about Revenge of the Nerds. The rape by deception storyline, they talk about it, and the filmmakers make the most mealy-mouthed apology for it. Like, yeah, I don't think we'd do that if we made the movie now, and I guess I wouldn't like it if someone did that to my daughter.
Ew, I guess.
Yeah. But again, only in relation to how a woman belongs to you.
Yeah.
Does this man recognize that as wrong?
Yeah. Ugh.
And then with the things like burning nerds on the front porch, that is, very clearly.
Yeah. Meant to
like
parallel
KKK.
KKK burning across.
And I mean, do you know that the reason why the Ku Klux Klan has the name that it does is because it was created like a Greek organization.
Fraternity. I did not know that. But.
Yeah. Which, when I learned that, because they were trying to get the same kind of like social capital that Greek organizations did, I was always very uncomfortable with Greek organizations. And I went to a school that did have them, but it was not a very big part of campus because, like, 3 cheers for misogyny, my school did not admit women until the late 1960s. And so because of that, there was never really much of a sorority presence on campus. And without like sororities, fraternities have a little harder time dominating campus life. So because of that, I could easily ignore the fraternities on my campus.
Yeah, and my school, there was no Greek on campus whatsoever.
Yeah.
And they even there were some historically Black fraternities that got like special permission to have like off campus while I was there or immediately after. So this movie is actually my sum total of understanding of Greek life at all, because my alma mater didn't have any Greek on campus. And because of this movie, like, I wasn't interested at all, not even a little. Yeah. So that was a selling point to me when I was looking for schools that Oberlin had no Greek on campus. I was like, oh, bonus.
Yes.
Because of this movie.
So the other thing that the filmmakers were trying to do, and in some ways I think they succeeded, was showing the importance of acceptance. If you're male, everyone accepts Lamar. Like, there are some comments. So when they're talking about having the party, Lamar's like, well, I've got a date. And Booger goes like, yeah, but it's a guy. But that's about as much pushback as we get from the Lambda members themselves, the nerds themselves. And everyone else is like welcomed and invited to just enjoy themselves and find a home in this fraternity of nerds. So like there's something kind of understandable about that. Like I get what they're trying to do there. But the problem is like it's only true for the men.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As for why it's beloved, what I was mentioning before about how prior to this film, I think nerds felt isolated often. So people who were either self-professed nerds, or actually, I don't think you self-professed as a nerd back then. Like to the point where actors who were going to be in this film were nervous about it because they didn't want it on their resume that they'd played a nerd. And so, the kind of people who were like pushed in lockers and picked on by jocks and stuff like that, I think prior to this film did not necessarily feel like they had a community.
So it sort of like defanged the insult.
Yes. Yes. And, some of it is also like the Robert Carradine and Anthony Edwards are both very handsome men. Now they play up the way that Robert Carradine like holds his chin and his teeth makes him look kind of chinless, and they have the thick glasses and like they're wearing unflattering clothes and things like that, but they are both attractive men. And there are some characters. So Curtis Armstrong is also an attractive man. Like he's a slob in this, but he's a handsome young man. So this is also like in some ways giving people like, oh, okay, it's not a bad thing to be a nerd. I could be like them. So defanging it that way, but then giving this like blueprint of like, to be a nerd, you can get all the things that are promised to the jocks: acclaim and pride and beautiful women.
Yeah.
So instead of it being like, hey, we're all people here, let's just be people together, it's like, no, you can beat the jocks at their own game.
Yeah. Which happens to be completely dehumanizing women.
Yes. And to the point where I was horrified to see this. Ebert does not have a written review, but there's a video review from Siskel and Ebert. Siskel did the main review. He talks about this movie as being gentle and funny, which I'm like, what? And Ebert actually says he agrees with him, and he says, I really liked it when the nerd got the blonde. Why?
Yeah. Yeah. Because he was self-identifying with the nerd and he doesn't get the girl.
Yeah. So it's, I have sometimes wondered about so Hattie McDaniel, who played the nanny in Gone with the Wind and was the first Black woman to win an Oscar.
Academy Award. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. I have wondered like what she thought about that part, what she thought about having to play that part, things like that. In the same way that I was wondering about the
actress who played Betty.
Yes. Well, I was thinking more like the actor played Takashi, who was playing up the Japanese stereotypes and pronouncing all L's as an R and that sort of thing. But then so those are ones where I think it's kind of obvious and clear, like how you're dehumanizing yourself for a part. I wonder what the actress who played Betty feels, particularly, I think she's still alive. It's been 40 years. She can look back on it. How does she feel when it was so embedded in the culture that
Yeah.
dehumanizing of women, that you are nothing but a trophy. You know, like you don't get to have your own opinions, and like an orgasm is all it takes for you to fall in love with someone. Like it just, there's that line from Tori Amos, so you can make me come, that doesn't make you Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, how is the violation not more important than whatever pleasure he might have given you
Yeah.
while you thought he was someone that you know and trust and love?
Yeah. I feel like that storyline is one of the key building blocks of the sense that like dubious consent is somehow justified,
Mm-hmm.
like to reach an end.
Mm-hmm.
This feels like a key building block that is the message we were given.
Mm-hmm.
She liked it. It's okay that the consent was dubious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or,
Non-existent in this play.
I mean,
Case.
she did consent to sex, but she
Just not
thought
with
that it
that
was with
person.
someone else. So it's like it's misled consent.
Yeah. So rape by fraud or rape by deception.
Yeah,
is usually
exactly.
how it's described.
Yeah.
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 I'm focused on also the idea like revenge of the nerds. So there are things that it is understandable that they're getting revenge. So like the destruction of their home, like burning the word nerds on their front porch.
Even being kicked out of their freshman dorm in the first place.
Yes. All of that are things that is understandable why that they would want revenge. But using coerced sex, both between Betty and Lewis and the images in the pie pans, what does that have to do with what has been done to them?
Nothing. Except unless we accept the fact that the pi delta pies are in fact the property of the alpha betas.
Yeah.
That's the only way in which we can accept that as somehow part of the so-called revenge, is if they're property.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they have just violated a third party.
Unless you think the other option is that the nerds are owed sex or attention from the Pi Delta Pies. So like, because the only thing the Pi Delta Pies did to them is mislead them.
When they said they would come to the party and then didn't.
And they said they would come to the party. And there's a point where Betty tells Lewis and Gilbert, hey, I think you'd be great if you wanted to rush Alpha Beta. I'll let them know that you're coming. And so they go and they're humiliated. So she had a part in that, but it was one person. And it was still not her doing the humiliation.
Even if it were like being humiliated by being rejected socially and being coerced
they're
into sex.
Feathered.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, it's bad.
Gross. Gross.
Yeah. So, which is another way that the filmmakers, I think, were trying to draw a parallel.
Yeah. Ugh.
But instead of it being like hazing's terrible,
right?
Instead of it's like beat them at their own game.
Yeah. Yeah. You're smarter. You can do it better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do the same stuff, but more efficiently.
Even the like letting go at the tug of war because they knew they couldn't win. Yeah. Be strategic in your hazing.
Yeah.
And your fighting.
And it's all like I come back to the speech that John Goodman gives about like, your father stood over your crib and wanted you to be men, and like the toxic masculinity of that. But he is like a father figure to these kids. The only other father we see is Lewis's dad, played by I can't remember his name. He was the guy from That'll Do Pig. James Cromwell, that's his name.
From Babe.
Babe, thank you. Who is like, as I understand it, a mensch of a person. And he's the one who came up with the laugh. And I don't know how they made him and Robert Carradine look so much alike. Maybe he was cast because they have the same nose. I don't know. So there is a conversation between Lewis's father and Lewis right when he drops him off. And like, it starts with, "I'm so proud of you, son." And like, you see some exchanges between them as they're driving, like they're calculating their ETA based on how fast they're going and blah, 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 blah. And there's a warmth there. Like, this is a father who truly loves his son. But the first thing they do is they ogle a woman's ass together as he goes to talk to her, or talk to Lewis as he's dropping them off. Like, and the camera like zeroes in, like that is a faceless, nameless woman. She's just an ass. And basically the dad's like, "Oh, you're gonna get laid so much. I'm envious. I wish I were with you. I were you." And it's the same. Like, I feel like this film invites us to reject the clear toxic masculinity of Coach Harris, where like, you're not real men because you're letting weaklings beat you. But it's not examining the toxic masculinity of the nerds and the nerd's father, who, instead of it being like, you know, "I'm proud of you, you're accomplishing things, this
Becoming who you'll be, all the things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like, you're gonna
get laid
wet so many times. Yeah.
Ugh.
And there's like, it's more than that. Like, there is a warmth between Lewis and his dad, and he only has like screen time for like 5 minutes. There's a warmth there that is not there with Coach Harris and his athletes. But it's still about like, "Son, all this pussy is yours."
Right.
You know? Like, it's not.
Right.
And it's not even like, you knew someone whose father told him like before he went to college, like, "Son, don't make any big decisions with a stiff dick."
Yeah, my former boyfriend's dad told him never make a decision with a stiff dick.
And that's actually decent advice.
Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is like, Lewis's dad isn't giving advice. He isn't like saying like, "Hey, I know what's going to be going on while you're here, and like,
be safe, be true to yourself, try to find love in addition to sex." Like, there's many, many pieces of advice for the young man that even involve sex that aren't just sort of. So if I can kind of draw out what the distinction is, I think the movie makers are willing and interested in examining and rejecting the toxic masculinity that would pit men against each other in competition around what they determine are arbitrary things. So in this movie specifically, the sort of like being a weakling or being a nerd, whatever that might mean. And they, by extension, sounds like they wanted it to also involve race. They're not willing or maybe able to examine the toxic masculinity that would pit men against women, with women as prizes and just simply walking vaginas to be conquered. And that's the distinction. Like, both are toxic masculinity.
Yes.
Our movie makers did not recognize the latter. And it sounds as though, like, to be, I was going to say fair, and I'm going to take that word out, to put them in context, to put the movie makers into their historical context, Siskel and Ebert weren't willing to do that either, or able, right? And those are two educated, like, well-read men.
And Ebert, I don't know if it was later in his life only or if his entire life, but he was someone who I regarded as thoughtful about social issues.
So to put them in context, like, Siskel and Ebert didn't see it either. They called it gentle and funny, right? Ebert liked that moment of Ebert liked that moment of the rape by deception, the rape by fraud. He liked that bit. And so did so many other people, Gen X and older, who were watching this movie and somehow feeling like a piece of their internalized oppression, a piece of their own self-loathing was being defanged.
Mm-hmm.
And they were being shown that, like, despite this thing that you hate about yourself or don't like, or that has been criticized by others, whatever version of that is true for that watcher, despite that, you can get the girl.
Mm-hmm.
You can win at this game that you've been losing at. See,
Mm-hmm.
here's Gilbert and whatever the guy, Lewis. I was going to say Tully, which is like, here's Gilbert and Lewis who are winning at the game that you've been losing your whole life and being told that you could never win, but they're like you and they're winning. And that is why it became beloved. And we were just, as a culture, either intentionally or unintentionally ignoring the fact that women are objects to be won, period.
Yeah. So the only woman who is not either sexualized or sexually humiliated in the film. So like there's the big woman who's supposed to kiss Gilbert. There's a montage when they're going to try to find an apartment where Wormser, the 12-year-old, rings on a doorbell, and there is a large middle-aged woman wearing like a Merry Widow type like bustier, and she's like, oh, this room's right next to me, and we'll get to hang out together, and like clearly sexual, but in a like, how dare you become sexually unattractive, and so of course that means you turn to pedophilia. I don't even know. Ugh. So the only woman who is not treated that way is Gilbert's mother. And I think it's interesting. Gilbert is talking to his mom at the very beginning of the film. He's nervous about leaving. He's nervous about leaving her. She's a widow. So his dad died at some point in the past. And, you know, he's like, are you going to be okay? And she's like, I was fine when you went to computer camp. He's like, well, that was only 2 weeks. And she's like, no, I'll be fine. Lewis comes in and he like kisses her on each cheek in a way that is very like, just respectful, but not like that. I use that word and it sounds like Eddie Haskell. Like it really does seem like, oh, this is my best friend's mom. And like, she's been great. I love her. She loves me. I'm her second son. And like, I think it's illuminating that the one woman that is neither sexualized nor sexually humiliated,
the mom,
is a good mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
a celibate mom because her partner's dead.
Yes.
Yeah. 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 Well,
it's so gross.
It's so gross.
I was expecting to maybe like have a giggle or two because I love dirty humor. Like I really do. So like, and the only thing that made me laugh was the word cleaver line.
Yeah.
Oh, and at the very end, the marching band. I kind of remembered the marching band part. I did not remember word cleaver. So, yeah. And so the people talking about how hilarious this movie is, I'm like, how?
Yeah. Yeah. We've been talking for a while now. Is there anything that we haven't mentioned that you wanted to make sure that you lifted up before I try and kind of reflect back some of the highlights?
I do want to just talk about how I think there's a straight line between the cultural influence of this film. Like, I don't want to say this film, but the cultural influence of this film and the rise of incel culture. Because as you put it, like, you've been losing at this game, but you can win at this game. And what bothers me is that even the filmmakers years later are not able to say, we should not have done that. It was wrong. Betty deserved better than that. They're still not able to do that, which shows me how far we still have to go. It also makes it clear that nobody comes off good in this film. Like, it's as if, like, if you're good at sports, you can't be a good, sensitive person. And if you're good at computers or whatever, all that does is make you better than the people who are good at sports. And all throughout, women owe you. They owe you to be pretty. They owe you to be sexually attractive. They owe you their attention, their time.
And sex.
And yeah. And
because you're better at it than those jocks. And that's
yes.
what they want.
Yeah. Well, it's the, like, you know, I'm putting a quarter in the sex machine and no sex is falling out. This is where nice guy stuff comes from. Like,
Mm-hmm,
you know,
mm-hmm,
like they just don't want they don't want a nice guy. Like I let her cry on my shoulder over and over and over again, and she never had sex with me. And it's like because she's a human being who has her own wants and needs, and it's not just a matter of like tricking her.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Even as a small child, I remember being like, I did not remember much of the movie, but I remembered the panty raid and I remembered the rape by deception. Those really stuck with me because I remember being like, I know they're supposed to be the good guys, but I don't like this.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm going to see if I can reflect back to you. It's actually not that much because it's all the same thing, I think.
Mhm.
I think ultimately this movie, it didn't even give with one hand and take with the other. Like it gave with one finger and then took with two hands. So like I
They may
think
have also gotten like a bucket involved to take
yeah. Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. So what it gave was kind of validation and defanging is the word that I've been using of the word nerd and that sort of constellation of socially inept, socially ostracized, maybe smarter than the average bear, weaker physically than the average bear, and marginalized as a result. It gave that identity kind of something to be proud of, but did it? But did it? So because the way that it did that was instead of saying like this game is bullshit and it's based on false premises of hierarchies of human beings, instead of sort of saying like I reject the hierarchy, this movie said, hey, we can be on top of that damn hierarchy. Just watch us. And by doing so, it traded in all kinds of oppression. There was sexism, and not just sexism, there was straight up misogyny.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like misogyny is the through line of this movie.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
There's homophobia, there's transphobia, there's fatphobia, there's anti-intellectualism, there's racism. There are pretty horrible Japanese stereotypes. There's pretty yucky Native American stereotypes that come in the talent show. We see rape by fraud. We see non-consensual sexualization and sexual humiliation with images taken without consent of these women who are not human beings in the eyes of the filmmakers or the audience. We're not expected to think of these women as human beings. Mm-hmm. And the point you just made is the reason that we're talking about it on Deep Thoughts. We often look back at things that we loved to see what was hiding behind the things that we loved. In this case, neither you nor I loved this movie. And in fact, it made you very uncomfortable. But a lot of people did. And I think the point you just made is the reason it belongs here in our project of Deep Thoughts, because it's a thing that Siskel and Ebert said was just gentle fun. And yet, by your analysis, it contributed to and was a pillar of a cultural kind of zeitgeist that has allowed the rise of so-called incel culture, involuntary celibate culture, where men believe that they are owed sex because of, I don't know, good behavior, which ain't so good.
Well, because if it's a game that they can be on top of, they're playing the game the way they're supposed to, and they're not winning,
and they're not getting the prize that they're
not getting the prize.
Yeah, precisely. And the way that this movie just accepted the hierarchy and put the nerds on top contributed to that idea that if these so-called involuntary celibates play the game appropriately, they should get their prize at the end, and they're not, because that ain't how the world works. And surprise, surprise, women are actually human beings, not prizes. And so this movie actually contributed to that, which is exceedingly dangerous, like deadly It is deadly for women.
And men.
So
I mean, I won't say his name, but the one with the manifesto from about 2014, he killed, I think, 6 people, 4 of them were men. And I even remember immediately afterwards someone being like, well, like most of his victims were men, so how could he be a misogynist? I'm like, oh my God. Like that's the thing. Like it's the misogyny is what had him go on a rampage. Like the bullets don't stop when they hit someone
right,
who
right.
he's not actually mad at.
Well, and he still might be mad too, because if you believe that it's a game and you're playing according to the rules and not getting the prize, and you see someone who you don't think should be getting the prize either, if you are not, like,
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
it's still based on misogyny.
Exactly.
So yeah, yeah. So I think that's a really significant through line that you're drawing that I wanted to make sure that I repeated and reiterated. I think another thing that you kind of pointed to a little bit tangentially, but I'll just quickly lift it up, is the ways in which like our cultural understanding of what a nerd is. This movie helped to sort of change that. Like people talk about themselves as such and such nerd all the time now. Like I have a mug that says museum nerd, you know, and like we welcomed Lynette Davis, who self-identifies as a black nerd, a blurred. And like it's like people talk about themselves like I'm a car nerd, I'm a this nerd, I'm a, like the word has become a thing to just mean fan, big fan. And that was not the case in 84 when this movie came out. And this movie was a part of, and I believe potentially at the beginning of that kind of change in the way we talk about that word, which is sort of interesting in that, like, one, I would in a vacuum expect that as we start to adopt that word more, embrace that word as a good thing, we would do it as a celebration of intellectualism. And yet this movie still feels anti-intellectual in some ways in the way that you've described it. So there's an interesting tension there that I don't have anywhere to go with it. I'm just naming it. So anyway, we've been talking for a long, long time. What did I miss that you want to make sure that you lift up in the final reflections? And then we should say goodbye.
The one thing I do want to just like mention as interesting is I do think that the way the film treats Lamar, who is the black gay character, I don't want to say progressive, but it's unusual in 1984.
Yeah.
He is out of the closet. He is perfectly comfortable with who he is. He is perfectly comfortable talking about it to people and having dates in front of his friends and others. And one of the things, and I'll have to see if I can find it, but I was doing a little bit of research and I think I was on Reddit. Someone was talking about that his cousin, who later came out as gay, loved Lamar's character and watched the movie over and over again for him. And I think that's interesting in part because Larry B. Scott had some career setbacks because of playing this character. And the actor who actually, I think the extra who played his date did not know that that was the part he was playing. And he actually was, I don't know, was an electrician on the set or something like that. He's like, hey, I'd love to be in the movie. They're like, oh, yeah, we need people for this party scene. And he was upset to be playing a gay man.
Weird.
Which I know that's what the world was like 40 years ago, but I have trouble wrapping my head around it.
Yeah.
And so, as I said, he was my favorite character. He doesn't get a whole heck of a lot of screen time, but he is consistently kind and savvy and intelligent. And by savvy, I mean like because he is a double marginalized individual, like he understands the consequences of various actions and yet is still willing to be unashamedly himself. And there's a movie in there. There's a film in there that actually could have been lovely, especially since, with the exception of Booger saying like, yeah, but your date's a guy, nobody has a problem with Lamar. And like Jefferson,
among the nerds, Jefferson
among the nerds,
scowled, but did it ultimately allow it to go forward? It wasn't a deal breaker.
And there is that, there's the when Lamar takes the spiritual record off and puts the 80s music back on, there's like this kind of like look between them.
Yeah. Recognition between the
Yeah.
two Black men.
Yes.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense.
And that's like, I don't want to say, I don't want to give credit to these filmmakers because what they did was awful. This film is awful.
But there is that bright spot of Lamar.
But there is that tiny little bright spot, and I'm glad that there's at least one person out there who saw themselves represented on screen because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for lifting that up. I'm glad we got that in. So next time, I'm going to bring you my deep thoughts about the Ren and Stimpy show.
Yes!
Which, by the way, is streaming on Paramount Plus. They have a bunch of the old Nickelodeon stuff on Paramount Plus. So I've watched several episodes so far, and I'm going to keep watching before we meet.
It's long.
You know, that's the very first. That's the very first thing in the very first episode is a commercial for Log. Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
Do they have Log for girls too?
That's in like the 4th or 5th episode, but yeah. Anyway, I will share all of my deep thoughts about the Ren and Stimpy show.
I can't wait. That's
next time.
A good palate cleanser after Revenge of the Nerds.
See you then.
See you then.
Do you like stickers? Sure, we all do. If you head over to guygirlsmedia.com/sign up and share your address with us, we'll send you a sticker. It really is that easy. But don't wait. There's a limited quantity. Thanks for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes. Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?